Another marvelous, though much neglected, aspect of the Constitution, and evidence of its genius, is its direction regarding the monetary system. The founders had very unfortunate experience with unsound money during the Revolutionary War, and wanted to set the nation on a course that would ensure its prosperity and stability. First, a few terms are in order. Hard money. Money that is actual gold or precious metal commodity, or paper money that is 100% redeemable in precious metals. That means that while the paper notes are transferred like money, they really only represent ownership of the commodity of real value, the gold or silver or precious metal. For every note or dollar bill, there exists an actual precious metal coin held in reserve in a bank. Fractional money. Money that is only partially backed by gold or precious metal. This means that there is not a one-to-one relationship between paper notes and gold coin, but there are more notes than there is gold. This is a very unstable form of currency and can lead to bank runs. Bank runs, also called a run on the bank, is when depositors swarm a bank all at once to retrieve their deposit of gold or precious metal because they know the bank only has enough for the first several depositors who arrive. Fiat money. Money that is merely paper and is not backed by precious metals at all. This is the most perilous kind of currency, and it is totally unconstitutional. Yet it is exactly the sort of currency that America is operating under today, and this is the cause for many of America's economic problems. The founders wanted better than this for America, and that is why they prescribed in the Constitution the following. Article 1, Section 10 declares that nothing but gold and silver coin shall be a tender in payment of debts. And Article 1, Section 10 also declares that no state shall emit bills of credit. Bills of credit are simply fiat paper money, money without precious metal backing. Author and researcher G. Edward Griffin wrote, "The monetary plan laid down by the Founding Fathers was the product of collective genius. Nowhere in history can one find so many men in one legislative body who understood the fraud inherent in fiat money and the hidden taxation nature of inflation. There was never such an assembly of scholars and statesmen determined to set a safe course for the nation of their own creation. Literally, they handed us a treasure map. All we had to do was follow it to economic security and national prosperity. But that map was discarded when the lessons of history died out with those who had lived it." How did government get so far off track? There are three reasons. The first is the fraudulent practice employed by banks called fractional reserve banking. This is where the bank loans out more money than it actually has in reserve. As a simple illustration, let's assume there was a gold standard and notes, or paper money, which circulated, were supposed to represent wealth in precious metals, which the bank would hold in its vault for safekeeping, that is, in reserve. Now suppose, rather than the bank only issuing notes for the gold it has on reserve, in order to make much more money by making loans, it actually issues more notes than there is gold in the vault. This is fractional reserve banking, a fraudulent practice not tolerated in any other industry, and which should be outlawed. The second reason is the establishment of a central bank owned by private bankers. This institution, in America called the Federal Reserve, is an outgrowth of fractional reserve banking. In order to continue this lucrative practice of fractional reserve banking and reduce competition, the bankers have formed a cartel protected by the strong arm of government. Essentially, this is what the Federal Reserve is. This institution has total control over the economy, with the power to print money which has been declared by law to be legal tender for the nation. Of course, the Constitution declares that the power to coin money and regulate its value is delegated by the people to Congress. And yet the Federal Reserve has usurped this power and acts independently without congressional oversight. It was manipulation of the financial sector based on this principle of fractional reserve banking that was responsible for the boom-bust cycles of the economy through the last 2 centuries that are so often blamed on capitalism. However, the bankers make huge profits through this practice, and government is happy to be in partnership with them. This process of undermining the precious metal backing of the currency has continued until at last the currency has no precious metal backing at all. The third reason we've abandoned the prosperous constitutional monetary system is that neither the bankers nor the governments like the restrictions of a gold standard. Gold is only advantageous to the people at large, not to these 2 groups. Gold currency puts restrictions on how much money the government can spend, and how much money the bankers can make through their fraud. But if the only legal tender is the fiat currency issued by the central bank, government can simply ask the central bank to turn on their printing press. Then they can have all sorts of money to spend on their programs, their wars, or to distribute as they please. When gold is the currency, it is much more difficult to redistribute. But when the money comes off of the central bank's printing press, it is very easy to control where it goes, and it goes first to the government and the banks. Down the road, it is the average citizen who later pays for this extravagance through the ravaging effects of inflation, which only manifest themselves some time afterward. Concerning the unconstitutional monetary system of America today, G. Edward Griffin stated, "It is sobering to realize that every previous nation in history that has adopted fiat money eventually was economically destroyed by it." The prophet Joseph Smith likewise saw the dangers of fractional and fiat currency, and he advocated hard money. He taught, "I consider that it is not only prudential, but absolutely necessary to protect the inhabitants of this city, Nauvoo, from being imposed upon by a spurious currency. Many of our Eastern and Old Country friends are altogether unacquainted with the situation of the banks in this region of country, and as they generally bring specie, coins of precious metal, with them, they are perpetually in danger of being gulled by speculators. Besides, there is so much uncertainty in the solvency of the best of banks, that I think it much safer to go upon the hard money system altogether. I have examined the Constitution upon this subject, and find my doubts removed. The Constitution tells us what shall not be a lawful tender. Article 1, Section 10 declares that nothing else except gold and silver shall be lawful tender. The different states, and even Congress itself, have passed many laws diametrically contrary to the Constitution of the United States. And so now we have answered the question of what is government for with abundant clarity. According to the plan of God, as established by His Scriptures, His prophets, the founding fathers whom He inspired, and the Constitution that He established, we know that government exists to preserve the freedom and rights of the individual, and that it cannot act in any capacity which the people have not delegated to it. The Constitution, with its just and holy principles of unalienable rights, limited government and enumerated powers, separation of powers, decentralized authority, free market enterprise, and sound money, is God's plan for the government of free men. Government welfare schemes and redistribution of wealth trample over the unalienable rights of man and undermine the just and holy principles of the Constitution. and the welfare state is false and dangerous, being the antithesis of the just and holy principles of the Constitution, and it is therefore the philosophy of devils. No doubt, even after viewing this presentation and witnessing its several evidences of the truth, there will be some Latter-day Saints who will still take exception to the principles herein. If this is the case, that you find yourself disagreeing, I ask, on what basis? Are the prophets wrong? Is the Constitution not true? Do you know better than God about structuring a government? Consider that. Well, I think, does not compare to these incredible witnesses and is no basis for justifiable disagreement of the principles presented. If your political views conflict with the Constitution, change them. As the Lord said, as pertaining to law of man, whatsoever is more or less than the Constitution cometh of evil. The Lord also said, no man can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will hold to the one and despise the other. We cannot hold to the just and holy principles of the Constitution if we choose to align ourselves with some form of collectivism. For those who may be curious to learn more about the proper function of government, the following is a list of some basic reading materials that will orient the readers in the right direction.